So good morning, welcome back, and good to see you all. And so the parasha now, we're finally at the end of the book of Exodus. Finally, the end of the book of Exodus, last portion of Exodus, and then going into Vayikra, which has its own theme, its own contents. So Pekudei, name of the portion is called Pekudei, the completion of the Mishkan, the completion of the making of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And again, to remind ourselves again, how many portions are there about the tabernacle? 4 portions altogether, 4.5 really, right? The first 2 are Truma and Tetzava, regarding the instructions to make the tabernacle, and then Vayakal Pekudei is the fulfillment, the actual execution of making the tabernacle. And then in between is Parshas Kisisa, which contains more about the tabernacle, but primarily the theme of Kisisa. The middle portion is about the sin of the golden calf. But the completion of the entire story, the entire narrative of the Mishkan, the making of the Mishkan, is over here. And the grand finale is chapter 40, verse 34, page 541 in the Art Scroll. And the grand finale of making the Mishkan, and to remind ourselves again also, the chronology was that they began making the Mishkan when Moshe came down from the mountain the second time with the second tablets. So he came down on the day which corresponds to the 10th of Tishrei, which was the 10th of Tishrei, corresponds to the Yom Kippur, which became Yom Kippur in the future. And he began making the Mishkan. They started collecting the donations of the Mishkan a few days thereafter. The actual completion of the construction of the parts of the tabernacle took place on the 25th of Kislev, which later became Hanukkah. But the Mishkan wasn't actually erected until the 1st of Nisan, so almost a year after they left Mitzrayim. So this passage over here is describing the initial erection of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and then the completion. There was a 7 days of what's called Milu, and 7 days of setting it up and practicing and getting it ready, and then the final finale of the entire tabernacle was over here, verse 34. It says, "V'yachasa onon." Sorry, verse 33 actually. "V'yokem esachot sesav l'mishkan v'mizbeach v'yitan." Okay, no, verse 34. "V'yachasa onon esa'ol moed." The cloud of glory came down and covered the tent of meeting. Ukavod Hashem molei esa mishkan, and the glory of Hashem filled the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And v'lo yochel Moshe lav el moed. We'll talk about this in a few minutes from now, but Moshe was not even able to go in because of the intensity of the holiness. And this was the finale. This was the final phase, the final manifestation of the divine presence coming upon the Mishkan, the completion of the entire thing. And there's a very, if you look at, actually I'll read there's a very famous quote of the Ramban Nachmanides. It's over here in the Art Scroll as well. The Ramban says in his introduction to the book of Exodus, he says that this book is the story, the whole book of Exodus is the story of the first divinely ordained national exile and the redemption from it. And the final words of the Ramban on the book of Exodus, with this coming down of the Shekhinah, the divine presence upon the tabernacle, it says that exile was not completed until the day they returned to that place. It was the exile of Egypt wasn't over until they came back to the place, came back to the level of their forefathers. The goal of the exile, of the Gul, of the redemption, is to bring the Jewish people back to a spiritual level akin to that of their forefathers. So when they left Egypt, even though they had departed from the house of slavery, they were still considered to be exiles, for they were in a foreign land, wandering in the wilderness. But when they arrived at Mount Sinai and built the tabernacle, and the Holy One, blessed be He, returned and rested His presence among them, then they had returned to the level of their forefathers, who had the secret of God upon their tents. Only they were the chariot upon which God rested. Then they were considered to have been redeemed. Therefore, this book ends by concluding the subject of the tabernacle when the glory of Hashem filled it continuously. So really, it's a glorious conclusion of the book of Exodus. It started off with the descent of the Jewish people going into Mitzrayim, the subsequent persecution, suffering, and exile in Mitzrayim in Egypt, their slavery, and then their departure from Egypt, going to Mount Sinai, and then the culmination, the grand finale, is the divine presence comes and rests down upon the tabernacle over here, and that's what the pasuk is describing. So it's a tremendous thing. It was a great celebration, tremendous celebration, and the Jewish people's hearts and souls were filled with this inspiration that they had the Shekhinah with them, and it was going to travel with them. Henceforth, after this, they were going to travel through the desert with the tabernacle and the divine presence upon them. So when we take an aerial view, I'm going to take an aerial view of the whole sequence from the initial instructions of building the Mishkan till this moment over here. There's a Medrash. Medrash says the following. It says that Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Simon, said in the name of Yochanan, Shlosha Devarim Shama Moshe min HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'Hitiya La'achurav. There were three things that Moshe heard from Hashem, and he was bewildered. One version says he was trembling. He couldn't figure out what Hashem was instructing him to do. There are three things that he told him to do, and he was just bewildered. What are you asking me to do? So one of these three things was the building of the Mishkan. So one of them was B'shasha Amala Kodesh Baruch Hu, when Hashem told Moshe to build the Mishkan, and the verse, this is way back at the beginning, chapter 25, verse 8. V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. Hashem said to Moshe, make for me a mikdash, and I'm going to dwell among you all. So when Moshe heard that instruction, like he was bewildered. Amar Moshe said, Miyuch lasas le mikdash. Sheyish b'socha, who could possibly make a mikdash, a sanctuary, a physical place, that the divine presence should be able to fill it? How could that possibly be? How can you give me such an instruction? How can you build a building? How do you build a building, a physical structure, to house the divine presence? A similar thing, for example, just comes to my mind. One of the blessings we make in the morning, two of the blessings we make in every single morning, I mean, these are worthwhile to ponder on and to think about. When you open up a siddur and take a look, in the siddur there's two blessings which are beautiful blessings. One is thanking Hashem for the proper functioning of our body. Asher yotze asa adam b'chochma. That's one blessing where we thank God every time we go to the bathroom, actually, but specifically in the morning when we get up, say that blessing. And then that's immediately followed by the blessing called Elokai Neshama, which is a blessing thanking Hashem for the Neshama inside of me. Thanking Hashem for the Neshama that He's placed inside of me. The end of the first blessing, though, about the body, the very ending of the blessing, it says, thank you Hashem. The blessing ends with the words, bless you Hashem, who heals all flesh and acts wondrously. He heals all flesh and acts wondrously. And right away then comes the blessing for the neshama. So one of the commentaries says that the words acting wondrously is because of the incredible wonder that the physical body can house the divine soul. And that's why the blessing for the soul follows right afterwards. So the most wondrous thing and imaginable you can think of is not just the complexity of the cosmos and the physical universe, but the most wondrous of all things in the entire world is the ability, or the juxtaposition, the fusing together of a physical entity with a lofty, divine, spiritual soul. It's unbelievable. You think about it. We take for granted the soul inside of us, but this neshama inside of us is godliness. It's divine. It's a divine spark. How do you get the fusion of the divine spark of a soul together with the physical body? It's miraculous, purely miraculous. And that's what we say in the blessing, umafli la'asot. He performs these incredible wonders. But that's with regard to the physical body and the neshama. We all have in the neshama this divine essence fused into the physical body, miracle. But Moshe had the same reaction. When Hashem told Moshe, make a mikdash, make a sanctuary, make a tabernacle, and I'm going to dwell inside of you, inside the tabernacle, and thereby inside of you. Hey, it's impossible. How do I do it? You could do that. You could make a human being with a soul inside, but how are we supposed to make a physical entity, a physical building, and somehow bring down the Shekhinah, the divine presence inside of it? So he was bewildered. He said, "Mi yuchla, how could that be done? Hine hashamayim shemei hashamayim lo yuchal kalucha." There's a verse in the book of Kings which says, "Behold, the heavens and the heavens of the heavens cannot even contain you. Hashem, you are so lofty, you're so beyond, not even the heavens can even contain you." Halo es hashamayim es haaretz ani moleh. Pasuk says in Jeremiah, "Behold the heavens and the earth, I fill everything." So how can we take your divine presence and put it into a structure of bricks and mortar? So Hashem said back to Moshe, he said back to him, "Eini mevakesh lefi kochi, ella lefi kochon." I'm not asking you to do this in accordance with my capacity. I'm asking you to do this in accordance with your capacity. I'm not asking you to do this according to what my capacity is. I want you to do this in accordance with what your capacity is. And from this we learn the message, the lesson, that when Hashem asks us to do things and we have tasks to fulfill, and we think they're too big and too difficult and too hard to fulfill, but yet we recognize the fact that this is a responsibility, Hashem's asking us, make the effort. Don't think about it. Don't look at the vastness and the depth and the complexity of the task and think about it, well, only people or only beings like God or only great people, only very strong people or only very wise people can do these things, or only very knowledgeable people can do these things. If I'm charged with a responsibility, I'm asking you to do it according to your capacity. All you need to do is make the effort. Just make the effort. You make the effort. Don't worry about the outcome. Don't worry about the results. Don't worry about what's going to happen. If it's a responsibility, then you can do it. And another famous line from the Gemara, it says that Hashem does not come like a tyrant against these creatures. All the instructions, all the mitzvahs, all the commandments, all that we have to do, they're not like these intense rules like a tyrant is telling us do this and don't do this and do this. Everything which we're told to do is because Hashem knows we can do it, and even if we can't do it, at least make the effort and don't worry about the results. We just have to make the effort, like the famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, that lo alecha malacha ligmor. It's not upon you for the job to be finished. You just have to make the effort. But God asks us to do, so that's what he said. He said to Moshe, don't look at it from the perspective of my capacity. Look at it from your capacity, and you'll see, right? He says, you'll see that my Shekhinah will indeed come down. And of course we know the Shekhinah came down. The Shekhinah, so they did their part. They made the donations. They made the Mishkan. And then, lo and behold, the Shekhinah came down. But, I say it so simply, it wasn't so simple. So it wasn't so simple that the Shekhinah just came down, because they gave the donations, they made the kalim, they made the vessels, but did the Shekhinah come down right away? I said that for example, they finished making it, the tabernacle on the 25th of Kislev. They first set it up on the 1st of Nisan, but the Shekhinah did not come down right away. They set it up, but the Shekhinah did not come down. What actually triggered the Shekhinah to come down? They did their part, true, but the Shekhinah didn't come down yet. The point at which the Shekhinah came down into the Mishkan wasn't until, and this is found on page 536, chapter 39, verse 43. V'yar Moshe es kol ha'malacha, Moshe saw that all the work had been done for building the Mishkan. V'hinei asu isa, and behold, they did it all, exactly like Hashem commanded, and how he said, do it in accordance with your capacity. Kasha tziva Hashem, as Hashem commanded. Kain asu, so they did. V'yavarech osam Moshe, and then Moshe blessed the people. He then gave a blessing. And it was thereafter that the Shekhinah came down. What was the blessing? So Rashi says, it's interesting actually, the verse says blessing, but the way that it's explained is this, and I'm assuming it's a Medrash, from Medrash. It says, Amar lahem he said to the people, Yehi ratzon shetishra shechina b'masi yadechem. May it be God's will that the divine presence should rest upon the handiwork of your hands. V'hinoam Hashem Elokeinu aleinu, may the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us. And these are verses which are frequently, we say these in davening. And that was the blessing upon the people, but it really is more of it was a tefillah, it was a request, it was a beseeching to Hashem. He said, may it be Hashem's will that the divine presence should now dwell upon the tabernacle, and may the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us. So the blessing, and at that point, at that precise moment, that's when the Shekhinah came down. So the sefer which I have, I just found this this morning. I was looking at this morning. This is from the sefer Mea Derech, whatever. It's a sefer I received a number of years ago, and he writes over here. He points this out. He says, "Really pay attention to this. Pay attention to this point." Is that they put all their effort into making the Mishkan, but the Shekhinah didn't come down until they davened to Hashem, until Moshe prayed to Hashem. Because all the efforts we put into whatever we do, I say this all the time, all the efforts we put into whatever we do, if we think, Kochi va'utzim yodi also as a chayil hazel, my power, my strength, my wisdom, my skills make my success, all I could do is make an effort. All I can do is just make an effort. But whether or not that effort is going to be crowned with success, depends upon the Eibishter, depends upon the Almighty Hashem. Hashem makes it happen. Hashem makes, we make our ability to make decisions is something in the mind, right? We make decisions in the mind. We choose in our minds a particular path of life. We make resolutions to travel those paths of life. So I can choose a particular path, and then even if I've chosen a particular path, or I've chosen a particular action, it doesn't mean saying I'm going to do it. You have to resolve to do it. So there's actually two steps in decision making. There's the decision that this is the right thing to do. This is the good course of action. But the second step is now the resolution that I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to resolve to do it. But all of that is in the brain. It's all in the mind. Whether or not that decision and that resolution is going to come to fruition is out of our control. That's up to Hashem. If I decide, it's a good thing for me to go and help somebody and give them a ride. Okay, so the person calls me up and says, can I get a ride somewhere? So I think to myself, okay, I really should do it. But then I resolve to do it. Then I make an actual resolution to actually get up and do it. But does that mean to say I've done it? Not necessarily, because I could get up and then I could hurt my back, I could trip over, or something could happen, anything could happen which could prevent the actual fulfillment of the decision. So in the physical realm, that's God's department. The mental resolution to do things, that's my department. So it's such a basic concept that we make the efforts, we make the resolutions, we make the efforts, but whether or not those efforts are going to be crowned with success is up to God. So one of the greatest mechanisms that we are charged and encouraged and inspired to be able to take advantage of is talk to Hashem, speak to Hashem, daven to Hashem, ask Him to please crown my efforts with success. And that's what this is telling us. They made all the efforts. They made all this effort to make the Mishkan, but the Shekhinah didn't come down. Only the trigger which caused the Shekhinah to come down, tefillah to Hashem. Please Hashem, make the divine presence come down, rest upon us, and make our efforts worthwhile. So without that, the Shekhinah wouldn't have come down. The Shekhinah needed the efforts of the people plus the tefillah of Moshe, which caused the Shekhinah to come down upon the tabernacle. And then it came down. And then how strong was the Shekhinah? And that's where we go back to the verse which I started off with on page 540. The divine presence came, the cloud came. It was a really phenomenal sight. There was a cloud surrounding the tabernacle. Within the tabernacle, the glory of Hashem filled it. It was like a fire. It was like tremendous, intense light. but it was so intense, it was so powerful, that not even Moshe could go inside the tabernacle. It says, Kavod Hashem Alei Mishkan, V'lo yochel Moshe lava la'oel moed. Moshe himself was not even able to enter into it. He couldn't go in. He was not allowed to go in. He couldn't enter it. The intensity was so profound. He couldn't go in. Ki shochan olav ha'anam, because the cloud of Hashem rested upon the tabernacle. Ukavod Hashem Alei Mishkan, and the glory of Hashem was filling the Mishkan. So he was barred from going in. It was so intense. And that's what happened. That was the indication that the Shekhinah really was there. And their efforts were successful. So the truth is that it's an interesting question because the Gemara actually raises a question on this point that Moshe couldn't go in. So there's a Gemara which says the following. It says, Rabbi Zrika, in the name of Rabbi Loza, he said, this verse I just read, that he wasn't able to go in because it was so intense. He said, how do we square this verse up with the following? We learned back in the portion of Mishpatim regarding the lead-up to Mount Sinai in the Revelation. The pasuk says there, "V'yava Moshe b'socha onon," that Moshe was able to go inside the cloud. I don't know if you remember those verses, but I've mentioned them before, that Moshe was able to go inside. He went up the mountain in the cloud, and that's where he spoke to Hashem. So the Gemara says, the Rebbe Laza, the sage over here, he wonders, I don't get it. He says, how come, with regard to Maimad HaSinai, Revelation, Moshe was able to enter inside the cloud, but over here with the Mishkan, he couldn't go in? What's the difference? I mean, it was the same. And I said also at the beginning, the Ramban says that the whole experience of the tabernacle and the divine presence in the tabernacle was reminiscent of Mount Sinai. So why was it? How come that he could go inside the cloud? He was able to enter into the cloud at Mount Sinai, but he couldn't enter the cloud over here. How come he couldn't enter the cloud over here? Why was he barred from that? So the Gemara says that the only way that he actually could get into the cloud on Mount Sinai was he really wasn't naturally able to go in. And he says, the Gemara says, that Melamed Shetasa Kadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe, that Hashem took a hold of Moshe, so to speak, and brought him in, physically brought him in, because he didn't have the capacity to go in himself because it was so intense, it was such a holy atmosphere. So Hashem had to hold him and bring him into the cloud. And then the Gemara goes on further, in the academy of Rebbe Yishmael, it was taught that Shevil, that it says that, I need new glasses. 1 second. So it says, I can't read this. Sorry, this is how I need a bigger Gemara and new glasses. Here, it says, Mala halon shvil, afkan shvil. So actually, it compares it to the splitting of the Reed Sea. That pathways were made in the splitting of the Reed Sea, in the same way that the Reed Sea was split to make pathways. So Hashem made a pathway through the cloud to allow Moshe to go in. And the question is, so he had to physically take him in. So then the question is, why over here? What was the difference? What was different about the Mishkan that he couldn't go in? And it sounds funny, you would expect Mount Sinai to be such a, that was it. That was the revelation. That was the holiest place in the world was revelation at Sinai. That he could go in. He could go. True, he had to be carried in by God. But how come he wasn't able to go into the Mishkan, the tabernacle? So another commentary which I found over here says he suggests the reason is based upon another Gemara, and this is a beautiful Gemara. Now I'm going to take my glasses off. So the Gemara said, this Gemara comments upon the contrast between the handiwork of righteous people in contrast to the handiwork of Hashem. The handiwork of righteous people versus the handiwork of Hashem. The Gemara says, Gedolim Maisa Tzadikim, greater is the handiwork, the behavior, the actions of righteous people, even greater than the handiwork of the heavens and the earth. Because with regard to the handiwork of heaven and earth, the verse says, Af yodi yosta eretz v'mini tipcha shemayim, which means the God, so to speak, says, my hand, listen carefully, my hand, singular, one hand, my hand has laid the foundation of the earth, and my right hand has measured out the heavens. So as when the prophet speaks in the name of God, that's what's happening over here. There's Isaiah, the prophet, speaking in the words of Hashem. And God is saying, my hand, singular, made the heavens, has established the heaven, laid the foundations of the earth, and my right hand measured out the heavens. That's with regard to the handiwork of the heavens and the earth. But when it comes to the handiwork of righteous people, it says, Mechon l'shivtecha ba'alta Hashem migdash Hashem kanu yodecha, and this actually is got to all work. This is a verse in back in Beshala Parsha. The foundation of your dwelling place that you Hashem have made, the sanctuary that your hands established. Basically, what they're doing, the Gemara is contrasting what is made in the heavens by God, that's akin to God's hand making it. In contrast to that which is made by the righteous people, it's akin to God's hands, plural, making it. And basically the Gemara is highlighting the fact that when you do something, when a person does an act of righteousness, it's like God kind of participates in that, like both of his hands are involved in it. But when he's creating it, so to speak, by himself, when it's just solely being done by God in heaven, it's only like God's right hand, a single hand. So it's allegory, but it points out this very fundamental point, the massive difference between what human beings can accomplish compared to what even God can accomplish. So says Rav Shimon Schwab of blessed memory. He says, he suggests strongly, the reason why with the tabernacle Moshe couldn't go in, the difference was because who created the holiness of the tabernacle? Who created the holiness of Mount Sinai? At Mount Sinai, that's the product of God's hands. He made the holiness over there. But at the tabernacle, that was man's actions, man's creation himself. He made the tabernacle. So because man invested himself, he invested his sweat and tears and toil into making this tabernacle, the holiness which was created was multifold greater to the point that Moshe couldn't even go in there, because that's the concept of the handiwork of righteous people, even greater than the handiwork of Hashem. It's an inspiring, amazing idea that what we do, the efforts we put into the things which we do, never underestimate the power of our actions. That we get this like myopic perception of what goes on in our world and our experiences, and we're only looking at the superficial, the surface level of whatever's happening, and we don't realize the spiritual depth of every mitzvah which we perform, that we are creating holiness. And that holiness is demonstrated over here, that Moshe couldn't even go into the tabernacle, in contrast to the holiness that he could enter into when he was on Mount Sinai, because that was it wasn't just Hashem. Hashem made that holiness at Mount Sinai, but in contrast to the tabernacle, that was only Hashem making it. In the tabernacle, though, that was Klal Yisrael making that holiness, and consequently, the kedusha was much greater. Moshe couldn't go in. So really, we have to really. It's a reminder of. It's a reminder. Everything which we do is, if we stop and think and we stop and think and not allow. Just had a thought. Just popped into my now. Now I've solved another problem. We have to stop and I'll tell you this. I'll tell you the other thought afterwards. But we have to think, remind ourselves of the fact that wherever we're at, there is incredible holiness and potential in that every single moment. I'll tell you what I'm referring to. In the last part over here, it says that the verse goes on to say that the verse goes on to say that only when the cloud left, you see, the cloud on the tabernacle didn't stay constantly. it flew, like, not flew away, it kind of folded up and like left, disappeared, went away, as an indication for the Jewish people to start traveling. Because when they're traveling, going through the desert, the tabernacle was all, packed up, and then, one of the indications was that the rising up of the cloud above the tabernacle. And that's what it says in verse 36. It says, when the cloud went up from above the tabernacle, that was an indication for the Jewish people to travel. But then verse 37 seems to repeat the same thing. It says, and if it wouldn't go up, right, then they shouldn't travel, only until it goes up. So there's a lot of repetition of going up, going up, going up. So the question is why. I was bothered by this. I was looking at this earlier this week. So one of the commentaries I saw says the reason why is that there's a strong emphasis on making sure that they weren't allowed to travel 1 inch until the cloud had completely ascended and gone away, moved away. Only at that point. So even if they saw the cloud was getting ready to leave, and they perhaps were eager to leave, eager to start traveling, the verse emphasizes, no, don't leave until it's left. Don't leave. Stay put until you have to leave. So so when I was reading that earlier this week, I was thinking, it's a very good, it's a reminder again. Stay put. Don't. If you're in a situation, if I'm doing something, if wherever you're at, and this is the right place to be, don't. It's so easy. Our minds are always like going to other places. Our minds are thinking about the past. We're thinking about what we're doing next. Wherever we are, stay put. Stay exactly where we are, and only leave that space when the time is right to leave that space. Because every opportunity, every moment you're in is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for kedusha. So that was the thought which just came into my mind now. But the general lesson is that that number one, whatever we do, whatever we are doing, whatever we're engaged in doing, don't cut God out of the equation. Don't leave God out of it. Effort we have to put in to everything which we do, 100%. That's our obligation, and even to undertake things which we may think are very much more difficult. No, we have to just make the effort, but don't leave God out. Don't leave God out. Make God a major factor in our efforts, and as we undertake our efforts or our different things which we're doing, constantly pray to Hashem. Hashem, please bless the efforts of my hands. Make it successful. That it's not just me doing it all by myself. Please you, I want to see you, I want to feel your presence in this effort. Please bless what I'm doing. And secondly, that my efforts combined with that awareness of Hashem's involvement, what I do, creates kedusha, creates a holiness about my life, which is even greater than any holiness that could passively be bestowed upon me by Hashem himself. Because what I create myself is more holy than even what Hashem passively puts upon us. It's our efforts which create holiness, and that's always a reminder that life is so precious, and life is so valuable, and life is so holy, and everything which we do is so precious, and we are creating a tabernacle for ourselves. I mean, that's really the language of the verse. Make a tabernacle, and I'll dwell among you. We have to realize, we have to feel this, we have to think about that we are a holy receptacle of an abode of God's presence. We have the neshama inside of us, and that's also the spark of godliness. We're holy. We are holy. We are a holy mishkan, a holy mishkan, a tabernacle for Hashem in our lives. So, to never underestimate the power of our efforts and the power of our prayer and the kedusha which we can create from everything which we do. So may all of this, again, be another brick in the building, in the spiritual building of building the future base of Mikdash. And I really meant to mention at the beginning that with what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and Ukraine, it's just such a terrible tragedy for everyone, but it's particularly the Jewish people over there, the communities, and how they're running for their lives and everything which we do. Again, we don't have the power to be able to do anything here by physically doing anything. We can give tzedakah, we can help with charity as well, but that's very, very important. But every spiritual activity which we undertake for ourselves, every commitment, every growth point that we make impacts the entire world, impacts the entire Jewish people and the entire world. So we should, keep strong, stay strong, and keep growing in our own personal growth, and see the end of all the tragedies and see the becoming of Mashiach very quickly.